This video, we are going to take a look at creating custom materials and applying new materials to floors. So I'm going to start out here and just draw in some walls. And I'll add in a separation here and then start with the floor. Going back to my architecture tab, my floor command. Go ahead. This is going to be a finished floor, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the inside face of the walls as opposed to a slab, which would be to the exterior of the walls, but I'm going to go ahead and finish that floor. All right, so right now it's just a generic 12-inch floor. So I'm going to go ahead and go into that floor. I'm going to go into edit type, and I'm going to go into the structure. And the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another layer to that so that I have what is actually a finished floor on top of that. So I have a different layer. So I'm going to hit preview here so you can see the difference when I added that layer in. If I click here on the two, you would see it would typically highlight there on the side, but that 1 inch is the top layer, and then that 11 inches is the second layer below. So you're looking at a section cut here of the floor. So to add a material to that, I'm going to go into my material category. I'm going to click on this little box here, little with the 3 dots, and that is going to take me into my material browser. So we've looked at applying some of the existing materials already. So I, of course, can do that. And if I want to search, I could see, I know that there's some tile in here by default. So I could apply one of these existing materials, or I can make a new material. So to do that, I'm going to go down here to the sphere with the little plus sign and say create new material. It's going to call it a default new material. I'm going to go ahead and rename that. I don't know what type of floor it's going to be yet, so I'm just going to call it floor 1. And then we go over here to our right, we have our graphics. So this would be our surface pattern and our cut pattern. So the surface pattern being what will show up in a plan view, the cut pattern being what would show up in a section where it's going to be cut in half, or, cut down along the side. The shading is just going to be the color that would show up when it is in a different graphic display motion other than hidden line. All right, so these are all of our basics, and the appearance tab is going to be related to what would show up in a when it's set to in our display down here when it's set to realistic. There it is. And then the image here, and then that would also translate to what it would show up like in a render if you were rendering within Revit. So for this floor, for this one, I'm going to go ahead and open the asset browser here in Revit. And there are actually a bunch of materials in here that are already created that you can search through and apply. So we're going to do that first, and then we're going to learn how to make our own material. So you can go ahead and search here up at the top. Let's see if I want to look for a wood. I'm going to go ahead and pull up all of the different types of wood that are in here. Here's one that's specifically set for flooring. There's other different ones. And just because it says it's flooring, it doesn't mean you couldn't use one of these plywoods or something else for the floor as well. But for any of the materials that are in here, again, these are pre-existing. They're built for you already. If you have any of these and they will work and you like them, you simply double click on it. And by double clicking on it, it's going to assign all of those assets, hence why it's called the asset browser here. It'll apply all those assets to that material. So you can see now here we have an image applied. So this image is going to be what we'll see when we have the view set to realistic, which we'll take a look at. And then these graphics, this one doesn't have a lot of graphics to it. Let's go ahead and add some so we can see what it looks like. So I'll just go with the bright pink there, and then I'll add a pattern in. Let's see, I would make this a model pattern and probably go with one of the parallel lines for the wood flooring. All right, so that gives some information that we can look at. So I'll go ahead and say OK, and then OK again. And I'll go ahead and assign that. Now, something that I should have done at the beginning that I did not was I should have duplicated that floor instead of having it remain generic 12-inch. So I can go ahead and edit that and rename that. So I'm going to call this floor 1. All right, so now we're still in hidden lines, so we don't see any of the attributes that I added into the material. But to see those, let's go ahead and go to change our graphic display option. So if I switch it to shaded, you'll see some of the color start to pick up there. If I go to consistent colors, you'll see that magenta color come in that we assigned. And then if I go to realistic, then you'll see that actual image here shown in the view. And these settings also apply for your, your 3D or camera views. It just depends on what display option you have. But if I were to switch this, you'll see in here, you see the graphic pattern that we have assigned there in the hidden line. If I switch to realistic, you'll see that actual wood image there. All right, so that's using the asset browser, how we can create a new material. I want to go back now and we're going to go ahead and create a new material, a new floor, a custom one. So let's go ahead and I'll go to floor architectural again and sketch in a new floor. All right, I already have floor 1 here, so I can go ahead and just I'll finish that here as floor 1, but we're gonna go ahead and duplicate that. So I'm gonna hover and tab, there we go, to get the floor. And I'm gonna go into edit type, and right away I'm gonna duplicate. We'll leave this as floor 2. Again, the naming convention is up to you. If you know what it is, if you know you're doing a wood floor or a tile floor, you can add that in. I would get, as far as when I'm working in a project in an office environment, I do get specific on the naming conventions here, but we're going to see what type of floor we create with this, and you can always come back and rename it. So I'm going to stick with floor 2 and keep it generic. Again, you can add in as much information for that as you would like. All right, so I'm going to go here and I would go back into the structure and create a new material. So before we create this new material, it's going to be important that we have an image that we want to use for that material. So we're going to need to go online to go find that. There are also some resources for that have kind of like material swatch libraries, and some of them are free for students and some are not. One I think is pretty good that could be used is the 3D warehouse. Those of you that have taken SketchUp will be familiar with that. And then of course, just Google itself is a great resource. So we'll go through each of these and talk about what we would want to search. So if I was looking for a wood floor, I can type in wood floor, okay, and then I can switch it over to images. All right, but something that's going to be really important for these images as you bring them in is that you want to make sure, you're going to want something like this that's a floor plan view, but you want to make sure that it's seamless and that has no repeat, okay? And that's really important because if it has a repeat or isn't seamless, then you're going to see it as like a square that repeats, right? So essentially Revit's going to take this image that we have and then replicate it across whatever the area of the floor is. So let's say the image is only like a little, 6x6 portion, but the floor is like 30x30. So Revit needs to replicate that pattern or that image again and again and again. So it needs to be seamless so that you don't see that tiling replication. So that's something that I want to make sure that I put here when I'm looking for images. So I'll put in wood floor seamless. It could be a tile. You could be looking for a herringbone. We can go ahead and try a herringbone here. Let's see. We'll see how good the image is too. Sometimes too, Google search, it's as good as you get. You have to try some stuff out. Sometimes it says it's seamless and it isn't. So we'll give this one a go. Also important that we don't have anything around the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and save this down to my desktop. All right, and then 3D warehouse is another great one. So you could go for, wood floor seamless, switch it over to materials, and you'll find a bunch of material swatches in here that you can work with. Again, it's as good as what you get. You have to try stuff out and see what works. But some good resources there for getting some good images in. All right, so now that I have that image saved to my desktop, my resource, you want to make sure too, as you start to save these images down, I recommend creating a folder for it on your desktop or your computer and making sure that, saving all your images into that one folder. Do note that if you take your Revit file from your computer and open it on another computer, if you have links to these images, they will not pull automatically, so they need to go with. So if you were to, let's say, put your Revit project on a flash drive and we're going to go print it on another computer, you need to make sure that you keep those links with it and that they're pathed to it on the new computer. So that's path that we're going to look at for the image is very important. So I'll go ahead and go into floor 1. Material, that is my material. Again, I want to make sure that I create a new material or I duplicate it. Really important though with the duplication that you're very careful about the asset numbers. All right, it's really easy to get 2 assets assigned to the same material and then not understanding why you can't edit one or the other. And that's because this asset name is very important. So right now, if I said duplicate and use shared assets, what that would do is going to create a new asset number, which is really important. So you'll see that this one, oh no, sorry, that one's keeping the same asset number. Thought that was one before. Okay, but it's not. But if I were to duplicate material and assets, see how it's giving it a new asset number. And that's really important because if in this one, if I were to make changes to this, it would then also impact my floor 1.1 because they have the same asset number. Okay, so these two, even though they're 2 different materials, because they have the same asset number, would reflect the changes that I make to that material versus this one, which has the asset number of 0, would be independent and would be okay. So for our floor 2, I'm just going to go ahead and create a entirely new material. All right, and then you can see the asset number is 0, generic 3, so it's totally new, which is great. I don't have to worry about those being linked. All right, and then I can come in here. So now we have a completely new material. So we have our image here. So I'm going to click on image. And then I'm going to go look for that file that I saved on my desktop. Which is oak herringbone. There we go. So I'm going to open that. All right, and now we get to see, we'll see how good this image is. But before we do, I'm going to click on the image again. And it looks like it's pretty good on the seamless, so that's great. But this is 1 foot by 1 foot right now for the scale. That's probably pretty small based on the size of this image. So this is in here in the texture editor. You can actually make some changes to the image if you need to. So, you can mess with the brightness if you need to do that for some reason. I don't think that that's necessary for this image. But for this, I do want to scale it up. So I am going to go down here. You can offset it. We'll look at that a little bit for one of the other ones. But for the scale, I'm going to go ahead and scale this up. Let's see. And these are right now, it is locked. So as I edit one, it will edit the other. So I'm just kind of making a generalization here. If that's 5 foot, that might be a little bit big. But if this is, maybe a 6-inch plank, I don't know, let's go with 4 foot and see. This is, you're kind of estimating it here for the material. I don't have an exact size on that plank. And with it being a herringbone, it's kind of hard to measure something linear. It's going to be easier to say, oh, that's, 1 foot wide plank or something. I'll go ahead and say done. All right, so now we have our floor 2 with our custom herringbone image. There are some other edits down here that we'll talk about a little bit later. I don't think I need any of them for the floor here. I'll say okay, and then okay again, and okay again. And there we go. So click deselect it so you can see the material. And we have a nice seamless herringbone floor. Take a look at it here as well. All right, so that image really did work out well and repeat across. All right, so that's creating a custom material and applying it to a floor. We'll take a look at, you can create custom materials and apply them to walls and pretty much anything you can apply materials to. Once you have that custom one created, it can be applied across the project.